Hi all, let's continue our look at the evolution of chess style and see how in the other game with Vasily Smyslov in the USSR Absolute Championship he varied his opening to a French defense. Let's see that game. So this was played a few days later on the 29th of March 1941. So e4 from Vasily Smyslov, and Botvinnik chose the French defense. And we see here Vasily Smyslov going into the Winoir variation. Winoir, bishop b4, so allowing black to pin the knight, and here e5, c5. These are very common moves today. These are the most common moves. And then we have knight e7, and often in this position white is going after the g pawn. French defense exponents such as Nigel Short have indicated, sometimes in jest, that's the problem, this pawn here. Otherwise it'd be a great variation. So yes, queen g4 is the most critical move really in the position. White instead chose knight f3, and it's interesting from an opening theory perspective how this could be punished. So let's see what happens here. Knight bc6, and here again it seems the most common approach in this position is either to play a4 to try and do something about this bishop, to put it on this diagonal. So that's emphasizing the dark squares, which are a little bit more vulnerable for black without the dark square bishop and pawns on light squares. You see that these dark squares are more vulnerable. And this plan of getting a bishop across this diagonal was used by Bobby Fischer in the Winoir variation quite a lot. So a4 is symbolic of later ideas in this variation. Also bishop e2. And you might wonder why not bishop d3, and it seems a very natural move, and it's a move I've played myself many times without really thinking about. What is the potential downside of this? Why play bishop e2? Well, you can actually punt also the Greek gift, so this is actually a rare move, but it can be good for blacks because you can get a Greek gift if black's not careful. A bishop sacrifice on h7, but black does not need to castle here. Does not need to allow anything like that. Black, as Botvinnik shows in this position, can actually play a forcing move, which is very, very good. Queen a5, forcing white to do something about this. Queen d2, and now another forcing move, which you might think a bit strange. It releases the tension in the center, c4. And one of the big downsides of this, of course, is also a4 and bishop a3 would be a little bit more effective. If this is a clear run for the bishop with access to d6. The bishop's driven back, but now this whole a4 plan is, and I like to use the word thwarted, it's a very good word I think to use in many games where one side is completely destroying another side's even positional plan here. The whole plan is thwarted by queen a4. And you can see an influence of Nimzovich here, restrain, blockade, security in the wider sense of the position, that there's very little, it seems, black has to worry about here. Although white has the bishop pair, this dark square bishop is extremely restricted in this position. But you might argue, hold on, with h4 now, white is introducing quite a few potentially dangerous ideas. One idea might be to put a pawn on h6 and then maneuver a knight to use the weakened f6 square. So these squares are under scrutiny, these dark squares, on various sides of the board. How does Botvinnik deal with this? He calmly plays bishop d7 here, and only now when h5 is played, maybe h6 is a positional threat with this idea of weakening f6, he does play h6, and he stops white from playing h6. Now knight h4, and again it looks as though maybe this could be quite annoying. Rook h3, rook g3, put some pressure on the king side. Now here is a great dynamic move in some respects, adding more security to black's position. Black plays knight f5, Botvinnik plays knight f5, allowing double pawns. The thing is, the knight is quite a useful piece in this position, and Botvinnik's really targeting this c1 bishop. The simplification, giving black the e6 square, could lead to another nice blockade with a knight on e6 sometimes. White did take it, e takes, so we have the double pawns, but we have a nice potential blockade square. So yes, this is very Nimzovichian, And you might wonder, well, queen f4, that can be answered with queen takes c2, protecting f5. So this pawn is not so vulnerable, the bishop can't get to it. We see rook g1, at least it's trying to be used as a lever for g4 here. But wouldn't that undouble black's pawns? Wouldn't that be welcomed? We see Botvinnik now playing knight e7, and in fact g4 trying to open some lines up at the expense of undoubling black's pawns. By the way, just as a note here, you might wonder, hold on, just rewind just slightly. If rook h3 had been played, just to go for this plan, you see that black has knight d8 just in time for rook g3, knight e6, and the knight would really take care of things. There'll be no problem for black here, it seems, at all, with this beautiful blockade. That would justify, the double pawns. So yes, white's gone through this route of just undoubling the pawns, basically, trying to peel open some lines. Botvinnik takes on g4, and he establishes now the fact that white has lost the bishop pair, and the f5 square is a good outpost. And again, it's not so easy to challenge this outpost. If queen f4 with queen takes c2, we see queen e2, queen d7. There might have been a concern about e6, so that's stopped in its tracks. Black's position seems very secure in a wider sense. Nimzovich would be proud, I think, of this game. Rook f4, queen e6, blockading the e-pawn, and also, of course, g6 is possible to further reinforce the knight. That is pressured, it's reinforced, and if white ever takes here, of course, black will get an outside passed pawn, which might be useful as well. a4, but what about this bishop, this diagonal? Well, how effective is the bishop? Black castles queenside, bishop a3, and white might be playing for a5 here, which could be a bit uncomfortable when followed up with bishop c5. So we see b6 now. This gives blacks various options to a5, including, just for example, king b7, just depriving the bishop of the c5 square and able to play rook a8 later. King d2, rook hg8, and here we see some waiting a little bit, rook b1, but a5 in conjunction with bishop c5, say king b7, bishop c5, it stops in advance, or prepared for in advance with king b7 now. We see a5, and here there might be a mould threat of bishop c5, rook c8. So bishop c5 can be answered with rook c6 in advance now. So a takes b, a takes b. White's really hasn't got too many threats here against black's king. Queen g4. This rook is also kind of misplaced. The rooks, I'm not entirely happy here coordinating with a rook on f4 and rook on b1. We see king c6, so taking away ideas of bishop c5, and actually rook a8 now looks interesting. Rook h1, king d7 waiting, seeing what white's doing. Rook h3, rook ce8, saying, look, I've blockaded the position, what are you doing here? Rook hf3, it's like the rooks are not really convincing, and that's because there's going to be some major exchange sacrifice. What are the rooks actually doing here? King c7, we see queen h3, rook g7, saying, do the exchange sack if you want. Queen h1, the queen decides to give it a go over here. Rook a8, queen c1, rook drops back. Now this might be a slight mistake, queen b2, because this bishop is actually a tempo gaining target. We see, okay, in one respect, is it dangerous, queen b4, maybe an exchange sack idea for queen d6. But rook a4 stops any intention of queen b4, if that really was the intention. And now with rook a8 coming, things have to get out of the way, surely. We see bishop d6. Of course, black doesn't want to take this and open up the rooks. The rooks want to just stay there, frozen like statues, from black's perspective. King c6, stopping any use of b5. And now it seems this rook is ready to work with this one, to start kicking the queen around and get into white's position. We see queen b1, rook ga8, and now rook a1 coming around here. So queen h1, rook a1. It seems black's in the driving seat here. His rooks are doing something quite dangerous now after queen h3, rook g1. The rooks are coordinating with rook here. This could be a mate in 2 facing white's king. H takes g6, and in fact, instead of the ordinary recapture, which is a bad position now. In any case, it's all very good for black, this position, but the most incisive is Rook A1, coming for a mate in 2. And this is very, very bad for white. This is lost now. Black's rooks have completely triumphed over white, which never really were threatening a convincing exchange sack or anything on f5. We see here Rook e3, and although that defends against the mate in 2 with the rooks, after Rook ad1, King e2, the celebration of defending the mate in 2 is short-lived now. Can you see the final move of the game on move 42? What did Botvinnik play in this position? If I give you 5 seconds, starting from now. So black to play. Okay. Knight takes d4 check, exposing an attack on the queen. It's only the rook that's defending the queen. White had to resign here. The problem is, this protection is not guaranteed now. If rook takes d4, for example, then check, although it's not mating, it's winning the queen. Well, it's mating pretty shortly anyway, after winning the queen. So it's a total disaster, this position. C takes, the same thing really. Check, and the queen's hanging. So a fantastic finish. Knight takes d4, a cute finish. But what a controlled game. I think Nimzowitsch, the influence of Nimzowitsch in this game stylistically is interesting. Black never really had any issues. A fantastic blockade on f5 led to white's rooks being kind of awkward, trying to do something, it seems, against that blockade in conjunction with maybe the bishop. Never really panned out to anything. In fact, black's rooks infiltrated via white's a file, which, you know, he played 8 takes, and that was kind of hijacked later for the rooks to come in, and it was white's king that was unsafe. A fantastic game with minimal risk, it seems. So kind of positional, you know, deep strategic masterpiece. But I think, yeah, with some Nimzowitsch influence. I wonder what you think about that influence from Nimzowitsch. It seems black's blockade strategy gave him such, you know, great positional security from early on. From an opening theory perspective, it seems now, you know, bishop d3 is asking for c4 under certain circumstances, although that releases the tension in the centre. If black is aiming to castle queenside like this, this was a model game, I think. So comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.